You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome back, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with Bettina Hein, who is the CEO and founder of Julie. Welcome to the show, Bettina.
Thank you for having me on, Dr. Roxy.
It is so good to have you here today. We've got a shark, people, a Swiss shark. So start off by telling our audience a little bit about your background. And of course, what do I mean by shark? You'll have to explain that. And then what you've been innovating these days.
Sure. So I am a lifelong tech entrepreneur. Julie, it's my current company. It's a chronic condition care platform. But I've done software companies my entire career, and all of them have been around taking large data sets, applying artificial intelligence to those to optimize for a certain outcome. So I've done that. Originally, I'm German, but I've spent 18 years of my life in the US. 15 in Switzerland. So I'm kind of back and forth across the Atlantic. And my husband is Swiss. So I have been for 3 years now, a judge on the Swiss version of Shark Tank.
That's terrific. And so tell us a little bit about that. What's that experience like?
So it's
the behind the scenes answer.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So I never liked watching the US version. I've watched it, but it always hit way close to home, way too close to home. It was like I would be screaming at the TV saying, no, don't give your company away for so little money. Don't do this. No, they're taking advantage of you. Yeah. And and also I found, that this sort of combative thing between the sharks, like I was like, So I moved back to Switzerland after 12 years in the Boston area. I was on a midnight train from Zurich back to where I live in St. Gallen, where I at least live part of the year. And somebody asked me.
No kidding.
Got on the train. Yeah.
That's
somebody
so
that was sort of, yeah. And I have learned as an entrepreneur to always say yes at the outset. If there's opportunity opens up for you, figure out what it is. Don't first say, no, I don't think I can do this. Say yes. You can always then decide this is not for me. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll talk to them. Though I was pretty nervous about it. I'm just a regular person. I'm not usually on TV. And I was also skeptical a little bit about the format. But lo and behold, 3 weeks later, I had a gig on TV, and I was on my way to becoming a reality TV show star in Switzerland.
Oh man, that is terrific. So, what are two things that maybe that you learned that have influenced your entrepreneurial journey since you've been on the show?
I've sort of seen the other side of the table. I see, what others are pitching to you, and I can obviously see through some of the things that they're saying, where I'm like, that's what I said when I was fundraising. And let me go a little bit more into detail. What I also learned is that, it's not really that combative. It's obviously edited to look a little bit like that, but it's not. I mean, between the sharks, we have a really good rapport, and we're like, this little club now, and we see each other. This is only 8 days of shooting per year, a whole season. So this is like a hobby for me. It's not a full-time thing. I'm the CEO of Julie, but I take out a week out of my year, and we do this show.
That's terrific. That's awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. What an adventure. And how serendipitous that it just happened to be on the train at the right time.
I know, right? If you told me like 3 years ago that I would ever be that, I was like, no.
Yeah.
That's a totally random and outrageous idea.
Something that you certainly can't plan. You can't make happen.
No.
Yeah.
But again, it's so much fun to like see behind the scenes of how these things work, how a TV studio works, how, what the different roles are. And, I'm used to calling the shots. I'm the CEO, but I've learned on the show, whatever you do is, hold still is one of the things that you have to do. Hold still and say, do whatever the producer says, then you'll be fine. If they say like, move a little bit like this, or, your face like that. And and then, you just do as they say. Obviously, we don't act out a script because I couldn't do that. I'm not an actor. Sure. I say what I want to say, but the thing there's a recipe book to this. It's a licensed format from Sony. Mm-hmm. And so there's, that's, it's for me, it's super interesting because it's like totally not like my day job.
So let's talk about your day job. So you have launched 3 different software technology companies. So have they all been in healthcare?
No, actually, they have not. My first company was a text-to-speech software company. Mm-hmm. So these days, that's ubiquitous, but I co-founded that company 20 years ago. And we thought that the application for text-to-speech software would be reading out directory assistance numbers. We did not. That was what we were thinking about. But it turned out that our software ended up in most luxury cars in the world, even sort of mid-range cars in the world, and in all Android phones. So I founded that company out of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Switzerland. We raised $8 million for it, and I sold it for $125 million to Nuance Communications, which a lot of people in the healthcare industry know about for the dictation and other things. So that was my first one. The second one was I then moved to Boston, and I founded a company out of MIT, which was in advertising technology. So and that company is called Pixability. I'm still on the board there, and Pixability uses artificial intelligence to optimize video advertising, specifically on YouTube and connected TV. Mm-hmm. So those are my prior companies, and what I experienced sort of as my journey within healthcare, with my own health, got me to think about how could I apply what I've learned in these other disciplines to healthcare, because I have to redeem myself. I'm the black sheep in the family. My father's a physician. My uncle's a physician. My aunt is. My grandmother was a pharmacist. My mom's a pharmacist. I have only two girl cousins. They're a pediatric nurse and a physical therapist. So my brother became a banker and I became a tech entrepreneur. We are both, still have to work for our salvation. And this is the way to do it.
Oh my goodness. That's so funny. It's interesting how often I hear that, happen to have guests on the show that are the black sheep of the family doing something in business and healthcare instead of being, medical doctor or something like that. So, what have you learned from those previous companies that you are applying to Julie in the commercialization process that you think are some lessons learned along the way that would be valuable to share with our audience today?
Well, maybe I should explain a little bit what Julie does, because then I can put that together. So what Julie does is that we are a chronic condition care platform. We help people manage their chronic conditions. When somebody gets diagnosed with a chronic condition, they're often, if it's a complex chronic condition, they're on a quest, right? They're trying to find out, how can I manage this? This is what, for example, why I got into this. 10 years ago, my daughter was born prematurely. And that was such a shock to me that I couldn't sleep afterwards for a year and a half. And I didn't know what. I Googled it. I went to my doctor and he said, well, you're breastfeeding. I can't give you anything. Are you stressed at work? I said, yeah, I'm the CEO of a growing company and I have a premature child. And he's like, oh yeah, that's it. I'm like, great. So I started wearing this headband monitor for sleep, and I hacked myself back to health. And since then, I was then retrospectively, I probably had what healthcare providers have told me I had, an atypical postpartum depression. Which doesn't seem like that crazy, but people weren't helping me. So there are many more people that have this kind of journey. And I started going on this quantified self, using data to manage your health quest. And what we do at Julie is we bring in 5 different types of data. We bring in everything from your smartphone, everything from wearables and connected devices like your watch, scale, blood pressure, cuff, etc. We bring in environmental data like weather, air pollution, pollen counts, sunlight hours, humidity, all of that on a very hyper local level. So, not the greater Orlando area, but exactly where you are. And then we tie in EHR data, and then we tie that all together with patient-reported data. So we have this app. Anybody can download it that's listening. It's in the App Store. We have really great reviews and ratings, so check us out. And you will see then that we chat with you every single day, and we ask you just a few questions. Right now, we cover asthma, depression, bipolar disorder, migraine, and chronic pain. And we're getting lots of requests to expand that, mostly to autoimmune conditions and things like fibromyalgia and other RA, things like that. So that's how has
the commercialization journey gone for you in the last year and a half?
Yes. So we're only a year and a half old, and we launched into the App Store 6 months ago. And we've had 6,000 people download our app and have onboarded them and are seeing great retention there. We're not selling anything in the App Store right now. What we're doing is we're proving out our product. And we are also right now running a clinical trial to validate that. Who will pay for it will be a risk-bearing entity. We are now starting to find pilots within self-insured employers, value-based care organizations, ACOs, and payers themselves. So that's where we're going with our commercialization. And yeah, we're off to the races in that regard. We had to build this patient-facing part first, and now we're building the B2B part of the business. And yeah, we've set up some interesting things in order to ramp up pilots more quickly.
So I'm curious, for our audience, is there anything that you learned in the previous two companies that you're doing differently here? And then also taking into consideration that, healthcare, commercializing something in healthcare, so innovative, is really different than there's some similarities, but there's also a lot of nuanced differences that can create some unusual challenges or obstacles for us to overcome in healthcare, as you just described, the multi-sided market.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I learned in previous companies is obviously the technical side, right? I learned that. I also learned that company culture plays a huge role. No matter what you're commercializing, if your team isn't really gelling, you have to work on that. I'm super privileged that, at this stage of my career, I can really find great people also in healthcare. And our team, which is a first for me as a, tech entrepreneur, 50% of our team is female or people of color.
Okay.
So that's something that's really important. And then the other part of the commercialization side is, in my previous companies, all of them, it was essentially having big entities to sell to. There is a B2B playbook, and I'm happy to tell you more about that, a B2B sales playbook that I am teaching my team. I'm hiring people that know how to do that you can execute. And for example, me being on your show is part of that playbook. But things like, for the last company, I wrote a book, Video Marketing for Dummies. There are different ways to build up credibility and build up relationships that are really important in order to get to that sale.
And is that something that you've done in the other companies, or is that something that you're doing in Julie, through commercializing Julie, because you're in healthcare? Help me understand that a little bit.
So I did it in the other companies.
Okay.
The first company sold into the automotive industry,
Yeah.
and that was also multi-sided, because you have to sell to someone that doesn't specify which product you're getting. They have to buy. You have to work with the called OEM manufacturer in an automotive. So let's say a Ford or a Mercedes, you have to work with them to figure out, with their pre-development departments, you have to figure out what they want and help them, understand what you're doing. And then they have to tell their first tier suppliers to RFP something that's hopefully like you want, and then you have to sell to them, right? So that's something there. With Pixability and video marketing, selling into advertising, you have to sell to a brand, but also to their agency. So you have these different influence factors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sort of taking those learnings and applying them to healthcare, obviously with the help of commercial people that have sold into healthcare all of their careers. But the sales mechanisms are not unlike in other industries, as I've learned in the last 2 years. I haven't been just thinking about this for since we started the company. And also, I've learned from my family how these things work.
Yeah, and I'm digging into this because I think that there are a lot of business practices, commercialization strategies and tactics that probably haven't been deployed in healthcare for a long time, because the way healthcare ecosystem was constructed is that you could skip over all of those best practices and still build a very viable and successful, profitable company in healthcare. That has changed over the last few years. So you're starting to see more and more folks, whether it's themselves as the CEO of the company or the talent that they're bringing in that are outside of healthcare, that have this expertise to augment the people that are understanding the nuances and the intricacies of healthcare, but also paired with, I don't want to just have team members that are 100% experienced with healthcare, because then we're missing a big part of what has been successful in other verticals. And so what you're describing is kind of this melding of the two, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that that you can apply in a lot of verticals. One of them, I don't know if you want any examples for your audience. So one of them is called inbound marketing, which you can apply. So sales and marketing are similar things, right? So you have to. The important is to bring them together at the right point. They're not the same, but they have to definitely work together. So one thing that is called inbound marketing is to generate interest with people so that they come to you. Well, how do you do that? You create content that people like your show, like writing a book. One of the things that we did a lot in my last company was take of the data points that we produced, that we took in, we produced reports. And we took the sort of high level summary of those reports to the media and said, this is something, for your background information, or if you are writing a piece here, we have some information for you here. And then we would get quoted in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or Ad Age and things like that, because they saw we brought something valuable to the table. Yeah. And then we used those reports and took them, wrote our newsletters about them, sent them to our clients and said, okay, you can book a meeting with us to see how this applies to you, things like that. And then we would track all of that in our marketing automation systems and our CRMs, and then go over to what's called ABM, account-based marketing. We would find out what are the big target accounts and who has interacted with us before in our webinars and on our website, downloaded white papers, studies, etc., and then engage them proactively with other marketing things. I could tell you a lot more about sales as well, but I think that this going together of marketing and sales is really key. And you have to establish yourself as somebody that's really credible in the industry by showing that and proving it with data. Right? That's one of the key learnings that I've had in my career on that.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. So, Bettina, I think that is a perfect example, because in most other industries, content marketing, ABM, inbound are things that organizations are investing in, all of these digital marketing activities, right? Whereas in healthcare as a whole, right? I'm not necessarily saying this is true for every healthcare company that's out there, but traditionally, healthcare companies are reliant on outside sales teams, boots on the ground, which can be extremely expensive, and trade shows. And you had this mass, I don't want to say exodus, it's the opposite of the exodus with COVID, with a lot of those traditional channels of selling and marketing closed up. You had a lot healthcare brands that were in business for 10, 20 years that were going, you know what? I think we need to start investing in digital marketing. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's 2020 or 2021. Yes, you do. And so there's, if you put 1,000 companies together at different stages of the growth of the company, you'd be hard pressed to even find a company that has a director of marketing or a CMO that's part of their core team. You'll see very robust sales programs and sales teams, but there's also this missing element of marketing in that commercialization process, and just relying on sales to develop all the awareness, all the appeal, right? Just owning that entire funnel from end to end. And so I love the example that you just provided, because it really shines a spotlight on the role that marketing can play in helping to augment the sales teams so they don't have to work as hard, they can work smarter, and create that synergy between the two. So those were really perfect examples.
I'm happy to share that knowledge. Yes.
So I want to talk about video marketing, because you had a company that was a video marketing company. And this, again, kind of just goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. I can't tell you how many clients that we have where they are like, nobody within our company wants to get on video. We want to be able to build something from nothing, from scratch. We want to be able to tell the whole world about what we have to offer and how awesome it is. But none of us are, comfortable being on camera. And I'm like, well, then you need to hire someone that's comfortable to get on camera, or you need to do some type of coaching and training that, just the role that video plays in that commercialization process is something that I don't think should be overlooked. So, what do you think?
Well, that's obviously what I spent a decade long doing, is telling people you've got to use video because it's a very engaging, emotional medium. You have to tell your story. People want to hear why you're doing this. They want to hear your backstory. And I think that's where you have to start getting people comfortable. I think if people think of it as like, I have to be an actor, they're like deers in the headlights. I can't do that. And they read off like some sort of text. No, don't have them do that.
Right.
Interview them and say, Dr. So-and-so, I know that you are doing this out of your passion. Tell me what brought you to dermatology. And then they'll say, whatever, as a child, I had this terrible contact dermatitis, and, and I couldn't have, or I had an allergy and I couldn't have a dog. And, that really brought me to this field, for example, right? That's something people want to hear. Yeah. Humans want to connect on a human basis. Yeah. They want to hear from this. And I think what you have to do there is connect with something where people are already comfortable. Like, are they already comfortable showing you their medical device and talking about it, right? Are they like getting, what are these people that want to tell their story? What brings out the sparkle in their eyes? And if you have the right video team, you can capture those kinds of things. And the good thing is these days, right, with being on YouTube, it doesn't have to be super polished, right? You know this. When I started my company, we figured out my video marketing company, Pixability. We were sending out what was at that point called flip cameras phones didn't have cameras back then. We sent those out and said, people, film yourself. And then what we did is we edited that together and put it into something where people were like, wow, I can't believe from what I filmed myself, you made it into this.
Right.
So I think people need to have just a little bit of confidence in the magic of what editors and, videographers and camera people do. They will make you look good. They will. They want you to succeed. And I think that's, hiring someone never brings out, you can have a voice actor doing stuff. And sometimes that's fine, right? To have a voiceover and all of that. But if you want to tell the authentic story, people want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. And I definitely am seeing the tide turn. And we've made a lot of progress over the last few years. There's still a long way to go as we're thinking about the role that video plays. And I love what you said too about that candidness or authenticity, because for the longest time, even when healthcare brands were adopting video, it was still a bunch of talking heads that were in blue suits. And it was just like, wow. I mean, it's just so boring, I guess you could say, just boring and no personality and none of that authentic story that you just described. So I think that the TikTok videos, the YouTube style videos, this more of like, I don't have to have it all put together. I can just be human, and being able to allow that humanity to connect with other humans, I think, as you're saying, can be extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm. And it can bring you into conversations that you might usually not be in. So, I do a lot of video, and when people meet me, they're like, oh, I watched the video about you. And, I loved what you said there. And that's immediately a contact point, right? Where people they're excited to talk to that person that they've already seen in the video. Mm-hmm. And, I bet the same thing happens to you, right? They've watched you before and they're like, oh my God, I get to meet you in person. It's just, people tell me they feel like they already know me.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is time. Yeah. And that's so cool, right? That you can do that with this medium. Also, putting back my analytical hat, you can also look at who watches these videos. You can tag them on YouTube with different keywords. You can optimize them. You can put the advertising in front of specific people, right? You can say, okay, I want people that are searching for this. And you can do that absolutely for B2P applications, right? People think, oh, well, that's just Kellogg's or Ford advertising. No, this really works as well for people that are looking for chronic condition care platforms, because what is your buyer's journey? You have to look at that. And how did they inform themselves? Well, newsflash, as you said, it's no longer just at trade shows.
Yeah.
That is actually kind of the last stage, right? That they may, if they're a trade show and they've seen all of your stuff, that they may talk to you, or they see you there and then later do all the research. But it's just one of probably a dozen touch points that you need with your audience to connect. So figure out, for example, at Julie, what we're doing on the consumer side is we're even powering our product development by figuring out which search terms do people find us through. What is the most successful thing? I obviously have, given my background, I have a CMO on board who ran her own advertising agency and sold it to become part of Julie. So that's how she does product development. She's also our head of product. And you can really understand things more if you have this involvement, because what you do is you get feedback. we get feedback on a daily basis from our users. We get people writing us in. And I know that doesn't work for every product out there, but for digital health companies, it's definitely something that you need to know. If you want adherence, to an engagement with your product,
Absolutely.
talk to your users every single day. There is no alternative.
I am a huge proponent. I call it co-creation. I have a co-creation framework that I developed to do just that. And to me, that fits into the culture piece that you talked about, where, it's not a traditional marketing research project where you pull a focus group together and this one moment in time where you're like, hey guys, what do you think about this? And you're gathering that feedback. But it is absolutely what you just described. It's part of the DNA of your organization. You're continuously staying connected to the customer, this communication stream that is just continuous for the life of the company. It doesn't stop and unless you close the company down, because you're always wanting to get feedback, even if it's what you're going to innovate next, every step of the way. So I want to touch on something else here before we start to wrap up. This is a really important topic in healthcare, right? Piloting is something that most healthcare organizations have to have a piloting strategy in their commercialization process, and making sure that their solutions are safe and that there's some efficacy behind the solutions that they're putting out into the marketplace. And so when you and I were talking before, you had mentioned about, how do we do more pilots? How do we do more pilots quickly? So just describe some of the challenges that are inherent to our current ecosystem right now when it comes to piloting that you guys have encountered.
Well, it all takes quite a long time, right? You have to get buy-in from a lot of people. And you also see right now, there's a proliferation of solutions out there. So you have to cut through the noise, which we're doing with, for example, our clinical trial strategy, where we said, okay, we've built into our software this very flexible clinical trial framework. And that's, how we can show efficacy. And we have all these users ourselves, right? So we're not just dependent on the piloting strategy with sites that are external. And luckily, one of our co-founders is a professor at University College London. And he, was able to, with our whole team, bring a study and a study design through their IRB within 5 months. So we actually, only a few months after we launched our application, 3 months afterwards, we were able to launch our first clinical trial with depression and asthma being the two arms of our study. What we're doing next with that is that we're creating something called a pilot in the box. And what that means is we can very quickly scale up an additional RCT very quickly. A trial, like within a day, we can spin that up in our software because we created this super flexible framework where you can say, I want to turn on these 5 features in the sort of active ingredient type of the trial. We want to turn those off in the other. So that's something where we can adapt to the entity that wants to trial. We can also do new conditions very quickly. We have the template of our registered study. If the study design, we can show, how it's, for example, HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, all of those data things. And that kind of shortcut the process of getting something started, because here's our recipe, we'll help you get that through your committees, through your process relatively quickly.
Yeah. So is it so what you were describing there are those some of the strategies to kind of expand the pilot program within an existing pilot partner, or are you also looking to be able to get more pilots outside of that, where you might have 17 different pilot partner companies and a couple of different ones running in each one of those organizations?
Yeah, it's to do it, and obviously you can expand that quickly, but no, the idea is to do that with multiple entities, and just having them be able to customize very easily what they want to do. But we have the template. We can ramp this up very quickly and deploy it. It's very easy. It's online. Your trial population can download this. There's really no delay to doing that.
So I talk a lot about piloting and some of those challenges that you've described that almost every innovator is encountering, because it's just inherent to the healthcare ecosystem. And there's a number of different things that can be deployed to kind of help with that. A lot of times when I'm hearing people describe their pilot scenario, it's that someone said yes to the pilot. So they're just, and I'm not saying this is you by any means, I'm just talking to the audience in general of, I got really excited that someone said yes, because I need to get these pilots started. And so just kind of acquiescing a lot of that control or negotiation in the pilot agreement up front of what is the duration of the pilot, who are going to be the champions of the pilot, what are going to be the milestones and the KPIs across that, to kind of fast track that, because I hear this all the time, is these pilots that just languish, that the champion left or priorities changed within the organization. And, so now I've got 6 pilots running, which should be a phenomenal thing for our company. But they're 2-3 years and I still don't have access to the data. I don't really know exactly how this is performing. I don't know if they think that so far we're 2 years in and this is successful, we just need 6 more months left, or if, there's just so much ambiguity amongst that pilot program and so many confounding factors and moving pieces that it can actually seem as though that it is the milestone to success, and it can be the milestone to failure, where companies are going under because they just have exhausted all of their resources and have no revenue coming in, but they got 6 pilots going.
Death by pilot, right?
Yes, death by pilot. I call it pilot purgatory. And it is a real thing. And so there's this, how many pilots should you have? I talked to someone not too long ago who had 17 pilots going on. And I want to say that they maybe had like 25 people within their company. And I thought, how in the world are you going to have any of those pilots become successful if you've got 25 people within your company, but 17 pilots going on? Who's at the helm there making sure that that's successful? And he was like, exactly, I'm going crazy trying to manage it all. There's
the best strategy that I've heard, and this is from my mentor and advisor, Kristen Valdez, who's the CEO of Be Well. She, smart woman that she is, never did any unpaid pilots. She never even piloted. She told her customers, like, look, if you want to do this, let's do a commercial agreement. We'll do it with favorable terms for you. But we're doing this in a paid way. So she had the guts to do that.
I completely agree, especially because you have so many innovation hubs that are just like, they're taking all applicants. So, the pilot partner could have 100 pilots going on. There's no stake in the game. There's no skin in the game. There's no responsibility on their part to make sure that your pilot is successful. They're just churning pilots in and out, right? Just getting more and more, testing these different ideas. So yes, absolutely. I say, come up with a strategy that is pilot to profit. and negotiating those sales up front, having some type of payment mechanism in place. It could be completely upfront, where it's like you described, where it's a full commercial agreement, or it could be something to where there are certain milestones that are met and there's some kind of transaction that takes place. Or if X, Y, and Z happen at the end of this pilot, then there's some kind of commercial transaction on the back end of it. But negotiating that up front rather than waiting down the road. So I think, Bettina, you're brilliant. You've had so much success under your belt. We could talk for hours and hours about Julie and the amazing things that you guys are doing and all of the wisdom that you could share with our audience, but we have run out of time. So is there anything else that you would want to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Sure. Easy way to contact me is to go to julie.co, our website, or email me at the first letter of my first name, b@julie.co. Also, one thing that I always offer up to everybody that's listening to these shows is that I have a weekly entrepreneurial office hour where I just offer up 2 half-hour slots to anybody that is doing something entrepreneurially in this space, and talk to them and, try to solve problems together. I've been doing this for 20 years, so there are a lot of things that I've learned, and this is my community service of paying it forward. So people can sign up at calendly.com/Bettina Hein. And I'm excited to meet some of the members of your audience. And if any risk-bearing entities are listening to this, contact me for a pilot with Julie. Thank you.
A pilot to profit with Julie. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and attention. To get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who shared the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.